Hello, how are you? If you buy bread at the supermarket, you need to watch this video. Today, I've picked out for you the main mistakes people make when they go to buy that packaged loaf bread, or even other types of bread that are for sale at the supermarket. A lot of people think they're making a healthy choice, but end up buying bread that can harm your blood sugar, your hunger, your gut, your satiety, increase inflammation. So it's very important to make the right choices and not be fooled at the supermarket. You're going to love this video. Stay until the end because you won't want to miss it. Before we start, I want to ask you if you buy bread and how do you go about buying it? Do you go by the price, the label? What catches your attention when you're buying? Write it for me down here in the comments. Of course, the first mistake that most people make is believing those pretty words written on the front of the package, right? We know that the food industry always has the power of marketing behind it to catch your attention there on the supermarket shelf. Sometimes you walk into the bread aisle and there are shelves and shelves of bread competing for your attention. So sometimes they put on the front, besides a super attractive package, phrases like whole grain, 12 grains, fit, natural, artisanal, high in fiber. That really grabs our attention and makes your hand reach out, already wanting to grab that bread. Actually, when you go to buy your bread, you shouldn't look at the front of the package. You need to turn the package around and look at the back, because that's where you'll find two very important things: the list of ingredients and the bread's nutrition facts table. In the list of ingredients, I'll tell you right now that whatever comes first is what the product contains the most of. So, for example, if this bread is labeled as whole grain, but the first ingredient is refined white wheat flour, it might contain some whole wheat flour in a smaller proportion. But what it has the most of is refined white flour, you see? So if the first ingredients are sugar, syrup, glucose syrup, flour, you should already be on alert because it could be very dangerous. And another thing you need to look at is the nutrition table, that little chart where it shows the amount of calories, fiber, protein, fat, and sugar per 100 grams. And a slice of bread doesn't weigh 3.5 ounces, 100 grams. The weight of a slice can vary from one manufacturer to another, and they'll indicate that as well, so you can better interpret these results. But I'll talk more about that here too. Second mistake, thinking that every dark bread is a healthier bread. People directly associate dark bread with whole grain bread. I don't know why, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the bread is dark because they've added malt, caramel coloring, actual caramel, syrup, molasses, or natural colorings. In other words, that rustic appearance the bread might have, looking fibrous and brownish, can be more about marketing than nutrition. The problem with bread isn't just about calories. We know that. People say things like, but it has the same calories as that white bread. Brown bread just looks more nutritious. But we know that the type of carbohydrate in there can raise blood glucose even more. And this matters a lot because when glucose rises quickly, you can get an insulin spike, which will then cause your glucose to drop afterwards. So you might end up experiencing rebound hunger. This can throw your metabolism off balance, cause you to accumulate more fat here in the central visceral abdominal region and make it harder for you to feel full throughout the day. So there are breads out there that when you look at them with apple, raisins, and walnuts, sometimes they're more like a dessert than a bread, as surprising as that may seem, and the amount of carbs can vary a lot from one bread to another. So not every dark bread is a healthier, fit bread. Pay attention to that. The third mistake when buying bread is not checking the amount of fiber. Sometimes the difference from one bread to another is huge. So it's really important that you turn the package around, look at that table, and compare the two breads that caught your attention the most to see how much fiber they have. Fiber is very important, not just for intestinal health, since it helps prevent constipation, we know that, but it also really helps slow down the absorption of carbohydrates, slow down digestion, improve satiety because it stays in the stomach longer, and improve the glycemic response because it moves more gradually from the stomach to the intestine. And on top of that, it also helps improve your gut microbiota. So fiber is wonderful for a variety of reasons. But many whole grain breads actually have very little fiber in practice. A pretty good rule for you to follow is to choose bread that has at least 2.5 to 3 grams of fiber per slice. That will already be a pretty good amount of fiber, especially since many breads sold as whole grain sometimes have less than 1 gram of fiber per serving, per slice, right? So it's a good idea for you to try to choose bread that offers more of these fibers for you. Otherwise, it'll be that same situation. You have breakfast, but by mid-morning, you already want to eat a cookie, a granola bar, something sweet. Fiber will also help keep you full and hold off your hunger. Remember that when you analyze the amount of fiber, it's also important to look at the total amount of carbohydrates because fiber is a type of carbohydrate that we can't digest. That's why it passes intact through the digestive tract. It doesn't enter the bloodstream and doesn't impact blood sugar levels. Now, one bread might have 3 grams of fiber and 14 grams of carbohydrates per slice, while another might have 3 grams of fiber and 17 grams of carbohydrates per slice. It may seem like a small difference, but if you add it up throughout the day, the metabolic impact can be quite significant. So look at the amount of carbohydrates, subtract the amount of fiber, and you'll get the amount of net carbohydrates, which is what you should pay attention to, especially if you are diabetic or want to control your blood sugar. Another important thing to check on the label is the amount of protein. Many breads nowadays have an interesting amount of protein, and that's another thing you should try to prioritize when buying bread. Of course, bread by itself is going to be a source of carbohydrates unless it's a specific high-protein bread. Normally, the nutrient that will be present in the largest amount is the carbohydrate. And I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that when you're comparing two types of bread, if you can buy one that has more fiber, like I mentioned before, and more protein, it will have a lower glycemic impact for you, provide more satiety, and also help you meet your protein needs over the course of the day. Also, be careful with those processed breads that are labeled as fit. Like I said, nowadays when you're shopping, there are so many options. Protein bread, fit bread, low-carb bread, healthy bread, ancient grain bread, sourdough bread. And then you get confused. You think, this one seems healthier than the other bread I'm about to buy. Not always. Despite having that label on the front, will it actually be a healthier bread? Because sometimes the amount of emulsifiers, thickeners, flavorings, preservatives, the amount of ultra-processed products and ingredients is extremely high. So the main thing you should pay attention to is trying to choose a bread with as few ingredients as possible. That's where you should start. Look at the first items on the list and see if they're really what you want to be consuming. I've already given you examples of avoiding syrups, sugars, and white flour as the first ingredients. And keep this in mind as well. Try to choose a bread with a shorter, simpler ingredient list. If the label is full of unfamiliar names, additives, or chemical-sounding ingredients, that's usually very different from seeing recognizable ingredients like egg or milk. In general, the simpler and more familiar the ingredient list, the better. Letters and numbers together, food-related codes. It might be something completely fine, but it could also be something not so great. Lots of preservatives, lots of coloring, lots of stabilizers. So, if there's less of that, it's definitely going to be healthier for you. It shows that it's less ultra-processed. Another very common mistake is thinking that just because you bought a healthier bread, it's a free pass, right? As in, this bread has a lot of fiber, this bread is dark, this bread has no added sugar, so I can eat 2, 3, 4 slices of it. That's not how it works. Always remember that bread, as I mentioned before, is a food rich in carbohydrates and is often calorie dense. And depending on what you put on the bread, the metabolic impact can be even greater. So be careful not to overdo it when eating this bread and with what you put on this fit bread. Because sometimes the bread itself is actually good, but then you start adding salami, ham, very fatty cheese, a lot of processed, ultra-processed foods, and then a bread that was actually fine, reasonable, you end up ruining it and it's no longer good for you. So these tips are very useful for you to get the most beneficial metabolic impact from bread. Here's another tip I'll give you, which isn't about buying, but about how to consume it, right? This is a bonus tip here. It's about ignoring the metabolic context of the meal. Because think about it, bread is already a carbohydrate. If you toast your bread and add honey, jam, banana with peanut butter, sugar, or other very sugary things that are high in carbohydrates, you'll be increasing even more the amount of carbs, which is already usually high in bread. So when you eat your bread, ideally you should look for foods that are higher in protein and fiber. A low-fat cheese, a natural turkey breast, shredded chicken, tuna in water and salt, sardines, eggs. Make an egg spread. You can even use mayonnaise, a pâté spread. I even have a recipe for it here on the channel. You can add lettuce, a cucumber, a salad, some cherry tomatoes. If you can add more nutritious foods to your bread, you'll make this meal even healthier. So, when you're buying your bread, what's a basic rule to follow? First thing, turn the package around, look at the list of ingredients, and check what the first ingredient is. Is it really what you wanted? If it's a multigrain bread, is the first ingredient oats, whole wheat flour, barley, rye, or does it have flaxseed, chia among the first ingredients, sesame? Pay attention to which flours and seeds are listed and where they appear, because if sesame is the last ingredient, there will be almost none of it in the bread. Second, try to choose a shorter, more concise ingredient list, with ingredients you can recognize without a lot of codes and strange names. Third, avoid breads that have large amounts of sugar, right? Preferably, choose ones without added sugar and without hydrogenated fat, trans fat, especially at the beginning of the list. If you can avoid them, it will be better for you and your health. These 3 pillars will already help you a lot in buying a higher quality bread rather than an ultra-processed one. Actually, it's like I told you, right? The secret isn't just choosing a good bread, of course that's fundamental, but also making good combinations and eating an amount that's right for you to ensure that the bread you ate, the bread you bought, will actually fit into your routine without negatively impacting your diet. If you're interested in making your own bread, I have a playlist here that you're going to love. Actually, I have several healthy bread recipes: low carb, low calorie, gluten-free, dairy-free, and many more. I also have plenty of bread alternatives that are just as delicious, nutritious, and very similar to traditional bread. So, I'll leave these playlists here to help you as well. I want to know which bread you usually choose to buy, or if you make it at home, how you do it. I would love to see your comment. I want to ask you to like the video because it really helps me here on the channel. And if you know someone who needs this information, let's share the video. Let's expand our chain of kindness. That's what I want here with the channel. See you next time. Bye.